about right there. I'm glad that I got out of that alive. That was like the greatest timing in the world for that. That was so good. No way we're recapturing that. Yeah, we probably at like 200 or something tickets.
Alright, just kill me.
I was correct.
Yeah.
Good work, boys.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
By the way, whoever the fuck was playing that song when the lobby exploded, you're a god. That was awesome. I just come out and I hop over a wall and it's here. Dun, dun. Yeah. Yep.
I'm pretty good, but you know what I mean.
That's really good, dude. Hello, my name is GamePenguin21, and today we're going to be talking about Squad. This is a sub 100 hour, more or less, review. Now, this is more of a kind of first impressions, kind of a review. I'm not sure how much of a position I am really to review this game, but I wanted to anyway, because I think that there is definitely a lot to talk about this. I'm fairly certain you've probably seen the trailers that have been floating around YouTube, or have just in general been heard about Squad. So, let's get into what Squad is, let's cover a few topics from it, I'll give you some general tips and tricks, and we'll go over the general basics. Let's get started, shall we? So I first think that we should ask the question, what is Squad? Well, Squad is a first-person, team-based milsim shooter. There are classes and there are other sorts of stuff, but in general, you're dealing with a super realism type game that is essentially a first-person shooter. A few topics to cover before we get into everything. I'm going to break this up into 5 distinct parts. We're going to go over general history first, but then we're going to go into general gameplay and graphics, as well as infantry roles, land vehicles, and then helicopters, because all those deserve their own stuff. So of the history that I was able to piece together from this thing, from just scouring around the internet and some minor research of my own, it was originally apparently a mod for Battlefield 2 that got spun off into its own game, similar to DayZ. However, unlike a lot of games, it was being worked on for about 5 years and was in early access for most of its run. It only recently got out of early access after that time. Now, I'm not sure of the exact details or if all of what I just said is 100% correct, but from what I've been told and from the description and the likelihood of other people who know more than me, I'm fairly certain that that's correct. To make this as a point of comparison, it's like Arma, but also not. It's kind of a little bit more restrictive than an Arma, if you like that, but it also has some very neat aspects that I really, really like. So it's like Arma, but a little bit more simpler. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, or that anyone who likes Arma isn't gonna like this game. Or if you just like shooters in general, you're not going to like this game. But generally, that's what the point of comparison lies. It's super realistic, and it sometimes has realism tends to get in the way of some of the other mechanics. Let's get into the general gameplay, and that was one of the first points. Realism is very, very serious in this game. Extremely realistic graphics, as well as general use of it. There are certain aspects to it, like you can get one-hit melee kills. It doesn't happen often. In fact, in the almost 100 hours that I've had playing this game, I've gotten exactly 1 melee kill. Oh, you were an enemy! Well, okay then. Yeah. Goes to show you how hard this kind of thing is. The maps are generally very huge and sprawling and have various different amounts of foliage, as well as different types of people and things that run around on it. You're mainly going to be facing off against 2 separate factions. These factions are, generally speaking, facing each other in specific scenarios, as well as facing each other in specific circumstances. And not all, game modes, and not all factions are created equally, as we'll soon find out, and there are generally different kinds of names for specific kinds of things and whatnot, and generally speaking, you're just going to have to ask what kind of roles and stuff that are generally available. Yeah, there are various roles, both infantry, armor, and even helicopter roles, each of them corresponding to specific classes, and each of them having things like squads. Now, the squad themselves has a hierarchy chain. This hierarchy chain is essentially doing the following. You have the standard infantry units, which is basically everyone in the squad. You also have fire team leads, which are appointed by the squad leaders, if at all, and they can generally do similar things to what a squad leader can do. We'll get more into squad leader roles and fire team and other sorts of stuff later in this video. But as of right now, the chain of command goes like this. You have the standard infantry, you have your fire team leads, you have your squad leads, and then you have your commander. Now the commander themselves is essentially the runner of the operation. Not all games can have them, but it's neat to have because they can do generally good stuff. And we'll get into that more with infantry roles later in this video. It's a hard kind of game to get used to, but generally if you like shooters, I would 100% recommend this game to anyone of that nature. Now, there are a lot of different numbers and things that I'm going to be throwing at you, so I'll go over them really quickly. You have HAB, FOBs, bases, objectives, and game modes. Okay, a HAB and a FOB are kind of one and the same. A HAB is basically the general area of which a FOB or forward operating base can be created. A HAB is generally speaking a radio which houses all the supplies and things you can bring up from your main base. Your main base cannot be taken or overrun by the enemy during any point in the match. That's for mainly all the objectives. Of the objectives that are there are a few different kinds of objective game modes, and all of the game modes, mind you, are objective based, because again, that's how military stuff works. You have things like destruction, where you have a set of objectives that need to be defended by one side, but killed by the other side. You have secure and protect, which, it's called advance and secure, which is generally speaking similar to domination, though not really. It's more of you have to advance to a specific location, secure it for your side, and continue moving on. And finally, you have invasion, and I think that there's one or two more that they're looking to add eventually. All of them more or less provide that you go to that one side goes to a location, the other side goes to that location to defend it, and general shenaniganeries ensue. And those are the generalizations of all those game modes. Secure and protect is advance and secure is probably the best of all of them because it's where the gameplay and stuff shines the most prominently. Okay. And very quickly, these game modes do range in difficulty depending on squads and leaders and all sorts of other stuff. I was going to mention something else, but I completely forgot. Finally, there is a tutorial for both infantry roles as well as flying roles and other stuff on a test range. I would highly recommend, after watching this video of course, if you're going to pick up the game, do that stuff first. At least do the tutorial for the infantry roles, as again, you can just, learn a lot from there, including things that are not included in this video that I don't have time to go over. With that said, let's move on to infantry roles. So, while to say that Squad is a role-based game with heroes and whatnot is not true. This is again super realistic, and the majority of the things that I'm going to be talking about have specific jobs and specific, ease of use. I'm going to go from the easiest to the most complex, and stopping to give as much of insight into them as possible. With that said, let's get into this. Starting off with Rifleman. Probably the easiest one to really get a hand of first. The Rifleman comes equipped with an ammo bag. That's their special sorts of stuff. The Rifleman is generally speaking the one who can provide ammo outside of places like a HAB or a FOB. And generally speaking, How you know how much ammo you have is while you're scrolling up and down your menu, you can see at the top that you need a specific amount of ammo in order to restock or be full on your, well, stuff. And just as a note, if you're spawning at a FOB, if you're spawning at a FOB, an FOB, a forward operating base, you do not actually get all of your equipment back. You spawn with whatever you died with. So if you wasted if you wasted 3 magazines taking down a whole squad of people and then died, you're gonna have to go and get those 3 magazines back. They don't replenish unless you spawn at main or at the main base. Other than that, you can go to either a rifleman, which is actually very good to be paired with a few other classes later down the line. But all in all, the rifleman has, generally speaking, good gear and can all around be used for various different kinds of missions, because I would recommend this to anyone as it's the easiest one to get a handle of. It's generally the most straightforward, and it can come equipped with a few different variations, some with scopes, some with iron sights, and also an interesting general note before we continue. If you have a scope, you don't have binoculars, generally speaking, unless you have a very low range scope. If you have a very high range scope, like an ACOG or something, your class does not come equipped with binoculars. If you have a very low range scope, such as a red dot sight or something with iron sights, you generally speaking have binoculars. This is good to note, as anytime you think that you would want to be a spotter for something, grab a class with iron sights, because 9 times out of 10 they'll be the ones that have binoculars, because again, you have to be able to see over long range. Next up, we have the automatic rifleman / machine gunner. These aren't the names of all the classes, these are the general names of the majority of classes. Certain factions do have different names for them, but they're usually in the same general spot and with the same general icons, more or less. These automatic riflemen / machine gunners come equipped with a big gun. Depending on the faction, you can get a giant LMG or just a gun with a drum mag. And it really depends on which faction you're going for, but all in all the guns in the automatic rifleman / machine gunner type system are all for laying down fire. One automatic rifleman / machine gunner can do the job of possibly 10 riflemen, or an entire squad of riflemen, if you really wanted to, which is generally speaking what their job is to be doing. They don't come equipped with really much of anything else except big gun. So yeah, again, another very easy class. My personal favorite, however, is the medic, which has a few different abilities, some passive, some active. The most passive of which is you have more bandages as well as a medical bag, for you can revive people faster as well as heal them. You're the only class that can do this. You can even generally see the well-being and health of your character, well-being and health of other people. If a person is calling out for medic and they are bleeding, you have to actually stop the bleeding before you can heal them up. And again, you can either do that yourself, or if they have their own bandages, they can do that as well. Generally speaking, any class can revive and can stop the bleeding, but only the medic can heal up any damage that the person has taken. What's also interesting to note for this point on is that when you are killed, you're not necessarily killed immediately, even if you are blown up by a grenade. You are sent into a down but not out state, and that's more or less a bleed out phase. Depending on how you died, the amount of time that you have for it does vary. If you die via an explosion, generally speaking, you'll have, depending on how big the explosion was and what you were hit by, you'll have generally less time than if you were shot in the face by something. So yeah, do note that you're not immediately dead, so don't hit the give up, as you will waste tickets. And we'll go into tickets in a little bit. Next up, we have the Combat Engie, or in some cases it's called the Sapper. Now the Combat Engie is basically, its job is to build forward operating bases quickly and effectively. You can build up literally anything that operates on a forward operating base. This includes, this is including but not limited to sandbags, HESCO, boxes or whatever, MG nests, mortars, tows, etc., and generally speaking, the fob as well. All of these can be built faster, and if you are a fire team lead, which I would highly recommend any squad lead to give the fire team lead if you're going to be building fobs to the combat engine. They can also build some of these aspects as well, but only the fire team lead, or only the squad lead, can build things like tows and missiles and other sorts of stuff like that. Next up, we have the Grenadier. Now, the Grenadier has a grenade launcher, easily enough. They can fire both explosives as well as smokes. Now, generally speaking, you can even range this up to approximately 250-ish meters. It really depends. To range up the actual different kinds of fire speeds, you're gonna have to hold down, I think the default is V? No, I think the default is either C or something like that. It's one of the buttons, as well as the scroll wheel. Scrolling up ranges your stuff up, scrolling down ranges your stuff down, easily enough. Same thing with marksman. It's more or less self-explanatory. They have both spotting scopes as well as gigantic-ass sniper rifles to basically pop heads with. They're more or less used for reconnaissance, and they also do come with bipods as well. Automatic riflemen also come with bipods, just so you know, to basically hold up in an area and kind of snipe people from afar. Their main goal is to be kind of spotty, but can also have other sorts of stuff. And then finally, for the last of the main roles, you have anti-tank. Your anti-tank roles are for basically any vehicle type explosive damage. Both the classes come equipped with a rocket launcher. Now notice how I said both classes. That's right, anti-tank has two specializations. You have the heavy anti-tank as well as the light anti-tank. The heavy anti-tank has a limited number per team, in that not every squad can have a heavy anti-tank, as that would be a little bit unbalanced. Heavy anti-tanks are generally equipped with, I believe, both regular rockets as well as frag rockets, I think, if they're using an RPG or something like that. But generally speaking, they're there to do damage to any sorts of vehicles. Heavy anti-tanks are more effective against heavy armor. This includes things such as BTRs, as well as tanks themselves, of course. And again, we're gonna get into more detail of this when we get to land vehicles, but for generally speaking, only use heavy anti-tank for really heavy armor type stuff. Each of these guys only has one shot, so do take your time with this. You can also, again, similar to a Grenadier, range it up to a specific range and fire away. For light anti-tanks, they can basically be destroying of mostly any vehicles. However, it does struggle against heavy armor. One thing that it can do, however, is do a thing called tracking, which I'll get into more when we talk about vehicles. Finally, the last few things that we have to note is the squad leader roles as well as the commander. The squad leader has a couple different roles. A couple of them being things like the regular squad lead, you have the crewman squad lead, and I believe you also have the pilot squad lead. All three of these are, basically speaking, better versions or more improved versions of the similarities in the actual place. They do have a few special abilities, such as they can place fobs and habs, but they do also have a few other requirements, such as requiring a scout or a squad member to be next to them, as well as having supplies, technology, and all this other stuff. So you do have to prepare, so you can't just place down habs and fobs frickin' everywhere. As for just having a regular spawn point, so long as you have one squad next to you, you also have a thing called a rally point. A rally point has a cooldown timer of 60 seconds, at which point everyone who is spawning on the rally point can spawn all at once. It's a good way of getting just your squad up to the front lines, so you don't have to build up a fob all the time. And finally, we have the commander. I don't have too much time in this game. I don't have enough time in this game to really talk about what a commander does, but in general terms, the commander can call in special like kill streak type things. Things like an A10 strike or a mortar strike that is more advanced than a regular mortar strike. They are generally very nice to have in your team, and they can call in a whole bunch of other stuff. And finally, just to go over really quickly, there are 3 different kinds of comms. There are the general public comms, which is normally mapped to V. These are comms that you can talk to other people in the general vicinity. I believe that the area is about 20 to 25-ish meters. You then have squad comms, which everyone in your squad can hear regardless of distance, and it's always in the person's ear. And for squad leaders and commanders only, you have command comms, which if you have an actual keyboard as well, you can also have direct comms to specific squads if you just want to talk to one squad without actually talking to all of them. Oh boy, I'm only halfway through here, but let's go. Alright. So next up we have vehicles, and vehicles themselves, and I'm talking about land vehicles in this. Not all factions have the same vehicles, and some factions have different vehicles and different armor types. We're going to go with some of the lighter armor, and then we're going to go into heavier armor as we continue. So first off, all different types of squads have these things called logistics. Now, what the fuck is logistics? In short, logistics is the type of supplies that you actually have in your vicinity. From the main base, you have an infinite amount of supply of both ammo and build material. Build material allows you to build fobs and other sorts of stuff at a hab location, so you can build up a rather nice base. Anything with build usually entitles things like the sandbags and the offensive and defensive types of stuff that you normally find at a hab. You also have things like scout cars and motorcycles, which are generally speaking, again, not available to all factions, but select few do have them. Scout cars are generally speaking more heavier armored than logistics vehicles in some cases, though they can get damaged by normal gunfire as well as normal types of stuff, so they're not too armored. And scout cars are different from logistics vehicles in that the majority of those kinds of cars have types of offensive things, whereas logistics vehicles do not. And logistics vehicles can carry both build and ammo, whereas scout cars have to replenish their ammo. Next up, you have BTRs. You have to be a crewman to drive and operate this sort of thing, and they cannot take on any heavily armored stuff like tanks. They can, however, take on things like scout cars and sometimes other BTRs. Now, in general note, and finally, I guess, we have tanks, which, again, they're fucking tanks. They should be the same sorts of deal as BTRs. You have to be crewman with it, and other sorts of stuff. Now, we're going to go over the mechanics of vehicles really quickly as well. So the mechanics of vehicles is that your vehicle itself does not have a general health bar. Well, it does, but that health bar is split up into several different types of areas. You have things like your engine, your tracks, your general armor status, as well as how much ammo and whether or not you have that ammo is on fire. Majority of the time, all of this can be seen when you're in the driver's seat of the car, or of the tank, BTR, or whatever. And in all honesty, it's very interesting in the way that it works. See, you have your general health where if you have a thing that can blow things up, in all honesty, it can get blown up. But I mentioned a thing called tracking earlier. Tracking is where your entirety of either the wheels or the tracks of the tank are completely just donezo. They do not work, or they're popped, or whatever. The majority of the time when this happens, your vehicle cannot move quickly anymore. It can move at only like a snail's pace, legitimately. You have to get out and, fucking fix it. The majority of how to fix it, though, is definitely something of a bit more of an interesting mechanic. A crewman or a combat NG has the ability to fix these kinds of issues, whether that be tracks or engines or something like that. However, there can only be so much done out in the field, and you need to seek refuge at a repair station, usually located either at a fob or back at main base. There's always 2 at main base, so you can always do it quicker there. However, 1 good fob can easily turn the tides and make it so that we don't have to go all the way back. And do note that it does use up materials, both build and ammo, in order to fix your shit. So do have some note of that. Finally, helicopters. These deserve their own category because, again, they are, generally speaking, their own beast entirely. Again, I don't have too much, not all factions have the access to helicopters. Some do, some don't. Majority of the time that they do, they're on maps where you need to be able to cover long distances. And generally speaking, when you're doing invasion, you're not actually gonna be using. The enemy team will not really have helicopters, and you might, it just really depends. Now, these types of vehicles, they function generally as flying logistics vehicles with guns. Yeah, they're pretty big, and they're pretty big targets, and they do move faster. However, they can be hit and hurt with normal gunfire, similar to a logistics vehicle, especially the engine. And again, if you have a hat or a lat in there, you can possibly just kiss that thing goodbye. They can be armored more times than others, and again, they can hover and do sorts of other stuff. I don't have too much with it. One of the other notes is that you have to be a pilot in order to actually, you know, do the thing. They also have flight controls where you're looking at generally where you're going. So if you push the mouse up, you'll point the helicopter down. If you pull the mouse back, you'll point the helicopter up. That's generally speaking how flight controls works. And it can be shot down by practically everything. And also a note, helicopters, again, function very similarly to regular land vehicles. You have specific amounts of different kinds of health for, generally speaking, different kinds of functions. For example, you have your front rotors, your back rotors, your general engine, as well as your general hull integrity, all of which you can be basically seen from the front. Okay. As for the rest of this, I think I'm just gonna have to leave it there because this video is already going to be very, very long. But in general, here's my final thoughts. I would 100% recommend this game to those who like games like Arma or maybe even Call of Duty, though I'm not too certain on that. I mean, I like Call of Duty, and this definitely scratches that itch. It's super fun and is definitely worth getting into. And with the full release at $60, that price point, more or less, is very good for what the amount of content that you get. I mean, again, I paid like $40 for it when it was an early access, and I think that I definitely got my money's worth. I could easily pay, I would easily pay $60 for this because it's just that good of a game. I would also recommend that if you have a set of friends, to squad up with those friends as often as possible, and generally speaking, stick to good servers as well. Overall, I definitely think that this is really good, and to the developers who made it to the full release, congratulations. You definitely deserve all the praise for everything that you've done so far. Keep up the good work, guys. We love it. Just keep that good content coming. In any case, enough with the praise. Is there any negatives? I mean, again, it's realistic. There are some, it's generally not buggy, but that's not to say that there aren't any bugs. I just haven't encountered them as much. I mean, the biggest bug that I can think of is sometimes the physics fucking up, where we'll hit just nothing and we'll go flipping the logistics vehicle or something. So, yeah, but not all games can be that perfect. But in generally speaking, it's really fucking good. In any case, I want to thank you all for watching this video, and yeah, see you later.